Welcome back to Conejo Valley Visionaries, a weekly podcast spotlighting the people and stories behind your favorite Conejo Valley businesses. I'm your host, Christina Denstead. I know you are going to love today's episode. You'll hear from Akbar Alikhan, the Deputy City Manager of Thousand Oaks. We dive into the Downtown Project, an exciting initiative to create a thriving downtown area in the city of Thousand Oaks. Akbar shares his background and insights into the vision behind the project, including creating a vibrant, walkable space that fosters local businesses, arts, and culture. We discuss the importance of community involvement in shaping this development, as well as the need for flexible design to meet future needs. And of course, I get answers to all of your burning questions. If you enjoyed this episode and find value in the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and rating. This helps more folks in the Conejo Valley find the podcast, and that allows each story to reach more people. With that, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Akbar. Hi, Akbar.
Good morning, Christina.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me on Conejo Valley Visionaries. It is such a pleasure to have you. I have been waiting for this moment to get you on the podcast. As I shared with you and probably every listener to this podcast, I am so excited by the Downtown Project. And I am grateful that you have given me some time today to not only answer my questions, but the questions of the community. A lot of us in the Conejo Valley are excited to understand what the project is, what the impact is on the community, and I know you are willing to give us some of the details. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. Okay, so what we like to do on the podcast is to go back to the beginning. And I would just love to know, Akbar, what did you want to be when you grew up, and what did you end up studying in school?
I definitely did not see myself in public service as a youngster. Both my parents are small business owners, and I think I just saw myself kind of in the business sector. And in fact, my undergrad was in a undergrad business program. And it wasn't until my junior year of college, and I can remember the exact class and the exact day where I wanted to pivot to public service. So I finished my degree, and then it was right around the '08 downturn, which was a great time to weather out the storm in grad school. So I stayed along for the ride and got my MPA, and then reached out to the city of Thousand Oaks, and this was my first landing spot after graduating. So 15 years later, I'm back here.
Wow. Well, what was that moment, though, in your third year? We've got it. If you remember those details, please share them.
It was, yeah, I have to reach a little bit far back. It was a natural resources class, and we were reading the book Cod. And Mark Kurlansky, the author, does a great job of explaining how cod has affected our nation's history. And it's a fascinating read in a short one. But one of the key points he makes is in the Northeast, because it was the basis of their economy, there were localities that were developing policy, and that became replicated on really a national level for anyone dealing with resource management, something that their economy depends on. And I just thought that was really powerful. You had a city of no more than probably 20,000 people developing strategies on how to maintain their economy for the long term. And I just thought, wow, what a concept. So that's what kind of turned me on to it. And here I am.
Have you RSVP'd to the first ever Conejo Valley Visionaries live event yet? If not, visit at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram to find the RSVP link to our first ever live event on March 24th at Hub 101 in Westlake. This is our Female Founders Series, where you will hear from 4 incredible visionary female entrepreneurs. There will be other fun activities. Starts at 6 o'clock on Monday, March 24th. Visit at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram to find the link to RSVP, and I hope to see you then. You, I understand, are from the Conejo Valley originally. So tell me, where did you grow up?
I am a Panther, went to Newbury Park High School. This is my backyard. Other than a few years I spent living in downtown LA and going to college on the East Coast, this has been what I've called home most of my life. So these are familiar grounds for me.
And after you finished your master's, did you think I want to go into city government in the Conejo Valley again, or were you sort of open to locale?
After spending several years on the East Coast in the cold, I knew I wanted to come back to California. Um, I kind of ended up back in Thousand Oaks a little bit by accident. I had reached out to Jackie Irwin, who was on the city council at the time, now, of course, our state assembly member. Um, to look at I had a concern around where recreational options for teenagers and really just our youth in general. There were institutions of our community, names that I know a lot of your listeners would recognize, like the Roller Dome or the bowling alley we used to have right by the Oaks Mall. Those were staples of our community that were starting to disappear. So part of my master's thesis was actually looking at the reasons why and strategies of how we could reincorporate some of those uses. Jackie was incredibly receptive, and as a graduate student, she was incredibly helpful to get me to meet a lot of our city leadership, and then that ended up turning into an internship after graduation.
Very cool. And that was with the city of Thousand Oaks.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And as an intern in the city, what kind of projects did you get to work on?
Well, in the beginning, this was you're just getting your feet wet. You have a lot to learn. I think the first project I was assigned was an annual document we produce called the Goals and Objectives document. Essentially, it's a series of performance measures and metrics to indicate to our community and to the council just how we did over the past year. Um, it may sound a little bit laborious. It is, but I'll say from a person who was just learning the ropes, it actually was a great way to understand everything that we do as an organization. I think in total there was something like 400 metrics that were part of that document, because that's kind of how many it took to illustrate everything that goes on. I think it goes on behind the scenes. Most people may not realize, but cities do a lot to maintain our quality of life.
Yeah. Was there a part of that, one metric in particular, or a sort of category of it that really interested you the most?
You're asking me to reach way far back, Sheena, but I'll do my best.
Well, I imagine something really drew you in to want to stay within the city government. So maybe there was like a part of it, was it the business, like figuring out the economy, or was there something within it that, maybe excited you?
I'm going to choose a really boring one, and it
Okay.
may surprise you. It was the number of catch basins cleaned. A catch basin, if you're not familiar with the term,
I'm not.
it's if you think of when it rains, just like it did this morning, that flows into a stormwater grate, and in that grate is a catch basin that catches leaves and other debris, so that water can flow freely into our stormwater system. Um, and so it's incredibly boring, but the reason it stuck with me is there's a lot of things that people would consider mundane that get done every day. And if it were not for the person cleaning out those catch basins, we would see increased flooding on our streets. We would see people with impacted commutes, and people with experiencing property damage. But none of that happens typically
Yeah.
because people are doing their job. And then that was really also another powerful concept for me.
Yeah, I could see that illustrates that like a city is a culmination of everything sort of working together.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's how it all works.
And how long were you an intern with the city of Thousand Oaks?
Pretty briefly. I think I was an intern, I think under 6 months, and then I found myself with full-time employment in our public works department as an analyst. Um, and I was there for about 4 years. My first job out of school here with the city. I went private after that for a few years, and then I've taken some laps around the county and came back to the city after a 10-year hiatus of being away.
Okay. And that was in Ventura County, right? You were there before here.
Yeah, so I was, if I'm recounting my steps here, I worked for a small utility district out on Silver Strand Beach. And then from there, was asked to join the executive team at the city of Ventura, which is where I was for the last 4 years prior to coming here.
Okay.
So in speaking about downtowns, that experience has quite a bit of nexus to what I'm doing here in Thousand Oaks. We often looked at Ventura as maybe one of the more lively downtown experiences in the county. And,
Mhm.
I was there during the pandemic when we were trying to figure out how to have people safely enjoy a downtown experience. And the Main Street closure, which maybe your listeners are aware of, um, that was something that we did as a city administration to respond to the pandemic. And I know there's differing opinions on how those people feel down there about Main Street, but I think we look back at that as a success.
So, how excited were you when you came back to Thousand Oaks 10 years later?
This was a dream come true. I don't think I was perhaps ready to go anywhere. I was evaluating options, including staying in Ventura. And the city of Thousand Oaks posted this job, and that advertisement led with the downtown project as being kind of the key thing that this person would be working on. And I remember it was a Sunday morning. I was sitting around with my wife, kind of taking a look at it, and the prospect of being back home, living and working in the city that I grew up in, working on a project that's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. Uh, it was just too good to pass up. So I had to throw my hat in the ring.
What do you think makes Thousand Oaks so unique and special of a place to live in?
Everything boils down to quality of life. I mean, we have our residents have a certain expectation here of what the city is capable of, and that's for good reason. I think this city has had a long, storied history of responsiveness and high touch uh, customer service, and that's just our brand. And our residents, to some degree, they expect that. That's not true of every community that you live in.
Well, speaking of the downtown project, as it's so interesting that it was like leading on the job application, because I did poll the Conejo Valley Visionaries audience, and I don't know if I was shocked, maybe surprised that 62% of them had said they had never heard of the downtown project.
Yeah.
So, can you give us like a high level description of the project and maybe take us back to the inception of the idea?
Sure. Well, I hope after this episode that's closer to 100%. So we'll deal with that statistic hopefully quite quickly.
Yeah.
In terms of where this started, this has been a longing of this community for many years. Um, there is a graphic that I show at a lot of the presentations that show an artist sketch of the Civic Arts Plaza realized as a downtown, dating back to 1987. Now, this building was it was completed in 1994. What was in that artist sketch and what got built were two different things, but the concept of creating a downtown at this space has been a thing for going on 40 years. As we've grown as a community, and we look at our employers, both large and small, one of the consistent asks of them to our elected officials and to our city leadership has been a community space, a downtown, um, particularly for those younger employees that are looking for, they like the quality of life that a community like ours offers, but they also want to have the amenities of a downtown core like they would find in neighboring cities.
Mhm.
So to answer your question more directly, it has been a consistent theme, probably going on decades. However, this particular push has been in process since 2018.
And what was the push at that point? Why 2018?
The city was getting ready to start on its general plan, and if you're not familiar or your audience isn't familiar with the general plan, it's the it's the land use Magna Carta for every city. Every city has one. You typically update it every 20 years. We just did that in 2023 after 53 years.
Hmm.
We were overdue, I will say. But leading into that conversation was this 2018 exercise called the Downtown Core Master Plan. And that was the city's vision setting experience for what a downtown could be. So they embarked upon that project quite seriously, and staff working with a consultant developed concepts and presented that to council in February. I believe the date was February 15th, 2020. And I mentioned that intentionally because they literally presented, it was unfortunate timing on, to
Was
present something like that. But
right.
they presented that first concept literally a couple weeks before the county declaration of the emergency, and then we tended to other things and didn't touch it for a while.
Yeah. So what do you envision for the downtown project? What's the goal? So we understand that it was like maybe something somebody had been desiring for a while, the city had wanted it, but in this stage, in this iteration, which it sounds like, we are moving forward with this project, what's the goal of it?
So the downtown core master plan document from 2018, a lot of the presentations and conversations I have, I lead with those core tenets of that document from 2018. I'm not going to remember all of them right now, but just a couple. Um, Creating entertainment and nightlife choices, creating community spaces, creating what are called third places. If home is your first place, work is your second, third places where you can, um, bump into your friends and neighbors on the street. Um, an idea that if you're going to travel here by car, you park once, that you're not driving from location to location in this downtown, that it's a walkable destination. And that it's something that every one of our 125,000 plus residents can call home.
Awesome. What's the current status of it? Where are we at with this iteration of the project?
Yeah, good question. So we had been in concept. So I took upon this portion of the project in June of 2023 when I arrived. We spent about a year plus in the concept stage. And then in December, just 4 months ago, the city council greenlit us to the tune of about $5 million to take it from a concept into design. And that's where we're at right now. We're developing a design. If you want to put it in percentages, 100% being fully designed. This stage, our goal is to get to that 30% design mark, and then put pencils down and put it in front of the planning commission and city council to say, hey, is this ready for approval? So that's our goal right now. The 30% design mark, for your listening audience, is you're not defining where the walls go and the air conditioning unit. You're pretty much defining the building envelope, the footprint, how tall it's going to be, the materiality, how the building is oriented. Um, those are really the 30,000 foot questions that you're answering as part of the 30% design mark. And the rest of the details can wait until after the project is approved.
And I realized we didn't talk about where this downtown is located. Where are you guys planning to put this?
Yeah, so we have currently where City Hall sits. It's on Thousand Oaks Boulevard, 2100 Thousand Oaks Boulevard, between Canale School Road and Herbs Road. Those two streets, those cross streets, are what we consider to be kind of the bookends of the downtown core. And really, we're talking about two city blocks. It's not a large space. Um, on site, if you haven't visited the Civic Arts Plaza, we do have two performing arts venues. We have the Cavly, which seats about 1,800 people. We have the Share Forum, which seats about 400 people. And so this entire effort is about how do we best complement the assets that this community has already invested in 30 years ago? How do we reshape this space so that we can create a full evening experience for our show goers? And how do we create a space that kind of honors this community and, not only where we've been, but where we're going?
Yeah, I love that. And I know that before, I come from these conversations as a sort of newbie to the community. I've been here for 4 years and I used to work here. So I always say, I had a different lens kind of coming in. Like I was always surprised by the Performing Arts Center and how large it was for the community and how that was already this big structure where you get, good quality performances. And I love the idea that this space, the downtown, will sort of complement it or accentuate it or drive people there for other reasons. And I know we've talked about maybe grabbing a drink before you go to the performance or having something to do after, but also not having to go there just purely if you're using the performance spaces too. So yeah, so just like conceptually, that's the space. Because I had a lot of questions about that too. Like, where is the downtown going to be? So, it's around the Civic Center, and essentially you would be building a second street next to Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Do I understand that
Yeah,
correctly?
correct. Yeah, if you saw the site plan, there's a street that is actually just to the south of Thousand Oaks Boulevard. So this would be between the 101 freeway and Thousand Oaks Boulevard. If you can imagine those two bookends, this would be a new street that we're nicknaming Main Street, uh, pressed up pretty closely against the buildings. This would not be a 4-lane arterial like, say, Hillcrest or Thousand Oaks Boulevard, but really more of your downtown walkable, bikeable street. Uh, in fact, where it intersects with Dallas Drive, which is the primary entrance into City Hall, to the east of that, between that intersection and the Lake Shopping Center, a lot of the feedback that we're hearing at our sessions is suggesting that we should make that closed to cars and just have it only for pedestrians. And then the section of Main Street to the west, have that be open to cars because we need that area for circulation. And that, I think, has been one of the prevalent themes throughout these community conversations we've been having is walkability, bikeability, acknowledge that we're in a car-oriented suburbia, which is fine, but then also make room for other modes of transport.
Cool. Speaking of the community conversations, how important is community feedback on this project?
It's been hugely important. That's why we're doing this. We're doing this for the community. So um, this round of it, and I know Christina, you had the benefit of attending one of those sessions, which have been just a ton of fun. I think, as you could probably tell by being there, not your average city council meeting, right? This was a very different format, more conversational, uh, but we were getting people who had never attended any sort of civic meeting ever, new faces, new voices, which I really loved hearing from, and young voices too. We're building this for the generation that's coming up, and we want to make sure that their voices are heard as part of this. So we did 5 in total, each focused on a kind of a different specific topic. And what we took away from it was just a great cross section of our community and a lot of good notes that we could incorporate into the design.
Yeah, I will say I was very impressed. I was one of those people who had never attended any sort of city council meeting or any, civic kind of um, meeting. And I was really impressed by how engaging it was. There were some, virtual tools that you were able to leverage to kind of gather our feedback anonymously and have conversations about it, which I really appreciated. And I see behind you for those people watching on video, the illustration, and I was really thought that was such a really interesting, cool element of the meeting was the real time visual interpretation of the meeting notes. And shout out to that artist who moved so quickly. Her brain, I cannot imagine how that was happening, but she was able to translate all the feedback and what we were discussing into these incredible visual representations. Are those on display at City Hall?
Yeah, so they are on our project website, toaks.org/downtown. So people can go uh, view them there, but they are really works of art that happened in real time, as you mentioned, Christina. Um, Michelle Booz Stone is the artist. She's a graphic recorder, I think is what she refers to herself as. Her Instagram, which I think is Booz Boos Stone, you can see a lot of her work. Pretty cool stuff. And we will have those on display at some of the upcoming city council meetings where we're going to be talking about the downtown. So if you didn't attend those sessions, be able to see those boards in real life.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that some of the folks in the audience weren't able to attend the community conversations, and we're curious, was that the end of it? Is there still opportunity to voice their opinion? What do you suggest?
So it's the end of this portion of it. And keeping in mind, all the feedback we've gotten to date hasn't just been these 5 sessions. This was built upon the foundation of that downtown core master plan, of which there was outreach then. It was then further confirmed during the general plan conversation over the past 3-4 years. And then this was kind of the culmination or final stages of collecting feedback for this portion of it. However, as we get past April and May, it's certainly not the end of the road for input. However, the project does become more and more defined, and our ability to make big swings starts to shift a bit. That's not saying, however, that what's going to be put in front of the council is set in stone, because we're designing a program or a project for the year 2030 and beyond. So we're kind of having to use our crystal ball here and understand, well, what does the market want in 2030? Uh, as an example, our team that's designing the mixed use portion of the project out to the west, they're designing, like ground floor commercial with the apartments up above. And they're trying to figure out, well, should these be studios? Should these be one bedroom? Should these be two bedrooms? Of course, we want to leave some flexibility in there for the ultimate developer. But, when this gets built, the demand for studios may not be the same as it is today, or the demand for two bedrooms, et cetera. So we're having to design this with a little bit of flexibility in mind.
That's really interesting. And I didn't think about like what the style of an apartment might look like would be could change within 5 years, because that does seem like a long time. And I know I mentioned this to you when I was giving feedback. I was thinking of my children at this age versus, oh wait,
All right.
maybe when this building and structure is in place, the downtown, my kids will be teens or at least preteens. So that is a I don't even know what to anticipate yet. Well, one of the big topics too was the business mix. And one of it sounds like when we've talked before, at the 30% mark, you're not, you haven't decided yet what exact businesses are going to be in there, but you might have an idea of some of the like kind of anchor spaces. Is that right?
I think we have an idea of what our community generally wants. And the session that you attended, we got a lot of great feedback. One of the themes, and I want to get your take on this of what you heard, but what we took away from it was a strong desire for local, that the community did not want to see these spaces occupied by national chains, that they saw this as an opportunity to showcase a lot of the businesses that we have in our community, or ones that are looking to start and grow in our community that maybe aren't in existence today. So these are a lot of the names that were mentioned were some of your guests of previous podcast episodes. So you kind of have the who's who of different guests in the Conejo Valley here. And those were actually mentioned by name, I think, at that session.
Yeah, I will mirror that. Not only did I hear that sentiment in that meeting, but definitely from my community is this idea of wanting the downtown to feel like of the place, and having a local, having businesses that are started here, run here, represented there. And I think though with that comes also a fear that they, being a local business, you might not have the budget for rent that could be the determinant from becoming one of those businesses. And so how are you guys thinking about that? I know that you are.
Yeah, of course. Just getting started, I think, is kind of half the battle. The amount of capital you need to raise, and I know I've heard a little bit about this in some of your previous episodes with restaurateurs. Um, that's a major hurdle to overcome to get going. One of the program components is this public market concept. And that public market currently would be actually in what's currently the city hall. So the first floor of City Hall, which houses our public works and community development departments. Today, it's just a sea of cubicles, but in the future, we are contemplating this for a public market concept. And if you haven't visited one of these, think of downtown Santa Barbara, downtown San Luis Obispo, where you have an open market with a variety of different vendors all cohabitating the same space, shared overhead, shared expenses, low barrier to entry, really just a turnkey space for you to incubate your restaurant. Um, I shared two examples in some of the presentations I give, one of the Oxbow Market in Napa, and then one of the Los Altos Public Market in the Silicon Valley area. And those are like two very different experiences. The Napa Valley one is more tourism serving because it is a tourist destination. The Los Altos one is more of your local serving. It's every single one of those establishments in that public market had existing storefronts elsewhere in the city or in the region. And they were looking to add a second location that was maybe more of a fast casual, non-wait service type of concept for their business. And they did it quite successfully. They've done a great job at curating and highlighting their local businesses as part of that space.
Interesting. I have never visited that one. I have been to the one in Napa before, and it's a beautiful space, and yeah, you can go there and kind of test and do different things in terms of food. I know that there was also an interest in like the arts. What are you guys? I wasn't able to attend that meeting. What's the approach there?
The arts one was probably our most well attended session of the five. We have a robust arts community. Um, I'll say two big takeaways from that session that are going to really influence the eventual program. The first is culture is going to be the economic driver for this location. Food, music, and art is going to be our angle. And the reason for that is, when it comes to general merchandising, if you're buying a t-shirt or a new pair of shoes, this probably is not going to be the best place to go do that. The Oaks Mall and the Jans Mall are fantastic destinations for both of those things. And not only do we not want to compete with or cannibalize, other shopping destinations in the area, I just think those two destinations are just going to do it much better than we can here in the downtown. However, when it comes to experiencing art, when it comes to amazing food, when it comes to performance arts, this is going to be that destination for our community. The other big takeaway from that session is that there's I think, a desire for broadening the definition of arts in our community. That's not to say that we're displacing the existing arts community here. I think there's a desire for this new generation to expand into maybe edgier genres of art that we maybe have not seen historically in our city. And so I think there's room for everybody. I think there's room to broaden that tent, so much so that an arts incubator, which is not a term I'd heard before January, is now one of the primary uses we are considering for this space. So, yeah, it was an incredibly fruitful session, and one that I think is going to have long lasting impacts on this program.
I love to hear that. That's incredible. And I do think maybe narrowly it's like performance art, music, plays, that type of thing, which there is an amazing, not only at the level of the performing centers and the Civic Center, but also within Hillcrest Performing Arts. There's so many awesome things like that. But I feel like physical art, I'm a strong proponent that we need to have some level of like outdoor art in this space. That's just my opinion. But yes, I'm excited that
You're not alone, by the way.
Okay, that you guys are considering that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we touched on some of the community questions that have come in. There are some others. I would love to go through those and make sure we get as many of them answered. I am sure more will be generated after they hear this part of the podcast, and maybe we can do another session or we can figure out another way to capture some more of those questions. But a big one, and I'm sure I heard this when I was in my community conversation, is about what are the transportation plans for the project so that we can create a vibrant downtown? And also, what is the parking situation? I think that, those two buckets are big ones. So where are you guys sitting on that right now?
Yeah. What's funny is of our 5 sessions, we did not have a single session dedicated to parking, yet parking came up at every single session nonetheless. It's clearly top of mind for a lot of our residents. I'll sum it up as quickly as I can. It's a much longer conversation, and we're still trying to figure things out. But here's what we do know. We have roughly 750 parking spaces in the existing structure. To construct that today from scratch would cost you nearly $40 million. It's a rather large investment that our community made many years ago. As part of the West Side parcel, we'll be developing another parking structure that it'll be rather disguised because it'll sit beneath residential structures as well as behind commercial storefronts. But that will generate another 250 plus parking stalls. Probably half to 2/3 of which will be dedicated to the residential units up above. But there'll be a component that'll serve the commercial use. So we have a great supply of parking already on site today. Um, the only challenge, based on our parking modeling, and we have the best experts working on this, is those marquee show nights. Um, Absent those marquee show nights, we do not really have a parking constraint. So the question then becomes, is for those dozen nights a year, is it more cost effective to build another costly parking structure, which takes up space? Or is there a way to leverage adjacent properties and kind of have a playbook for what parking may look like on a marquee show night? Um, if you visit the Santa Barbara Bowl, if you visit the Amundsen, um, the Hollywood Bowl is obviously a much different animal, but still the concept still holds. Each one of those communities has a playbook for how they handle those marquee shows. And it's usually a combination of quick shuttling, from someplace nearby. It's incentives to take rideshare to the site, and also leveraging other local property owners. For example, we have several plazas here where most of those uses shut down at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. And our shows don't really start till 7 p.m. So there's an opportunity there where they can leverage their parking assets for those marquee nights to accommodate everybody. But to the second half of your question, one of the other themes from all 5 sessions was a desire to take other forms of transport here, something that we hadn't heard quite yet. People want to be able to bike here. They want to be able to maybe take a trolley up and down the boulevard, maybe in the summertime on Friday and Saturday nights, kind of a hop on, hop off kind of thing. They want to see electric vehicle charging. And this is one I had not heard until the session. They want to see e-bike charging. So as they ride their e-bike here, they want to be able to plug it in so they have juice to get back home without pedaling too much. So these are all things that if we know them in advance, it's much easier to design them into the program now than have to kind of go ahead and adapt those later after the place is already built and constructed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, in 5 years, what does this look like? We're not quite sure, but I definitely can say an electric component makes a lot of sense. But will we all be, taking driverless Ubers there? Who knows at this point?
Right.
Important to consider it all. Okay, one question here. This is broad, how do you plan to make it successful?
Well, we have the right experts on the team today. We have retail consultants. We have economists. We have all the right brains in the room to make it successful. I think part of the loaded part of that question, Christina, and I'm not casting judgment, is how do you define success?
Yeah.
Is it economic success? I would define success really how I think some of our council members have defined it from the dais, and that is, are there people here? If there are people here, we will have done our job right. So we need to make this accessible, not only physically, but economically. We need to make it inviting. We need to make it a place that's interesting. And going back, this kind of dovetails to your parking question just from a minute ago. Some people want to park their car right in front of the building. They want to be able to get out and get to the front door in 15 seconds or less. And so when you show them a site plan of, hey, this is where you would have to park, you'd have to walk down these stairs or take this elevator, safely, of course. But it's not going to be the convenience of just pulling right up to the thing. But no successful downtown is. I can't think of a downtown where you are willing to walk because downtowns are that exciting, they're that energizing, they're that interesting. And that's the space we're trying to create. We're trying to create the space that you really don't mind going into the structure and walking 45 seconds down to the main street. It's because you want to be there.
Yeah. And it's smart to sort of set that expectation of what it is versus having somebody think it is just a very easily accessible car mall or something. Although, we're used to malls too. You have to walk a little bit. So yeah, I think it's setting the expectation of
Yeah.
what that means.
Martina, can we go back to that for just a second? Because you mentioned
Sure.
the mall.
Yes.
And we're all so used to malls, right? You park, and I have this conversation with our residents sometimes, and I ask them, "What's your favorite store in the mall?" And they're like, "Well, I go there to go to the Apple Store." I'm like, "Okay, so where do you park when you go to the Apple Store?" And they're like, "Well, I like to park out by the Cheesecake Factory because that's kind of like the closest entrance to the Apple Store." I'm like, "Well, okay, that tends to be one of the busiest entrances to the mall." So I'm like, "So where exactly do you park?" I'm like, "Well, I can't really find a parking space, right by the door, but so I usually go, towards Dick's Sporting Goods, or I'll go towards the J.C. Penney, and a little bit out in the distance, and then I'll walk." I said, "Next time you do that, do me a favor. Just look at your phone, start a little stopwatch, and tell me how long it takes you to get to the Apple Store." And I would venture to guess that that commute from your car to the Apple Store is the same, if not longer, than what we're asking anyone to do here as part of a downtown. So the reason I mention that is we already have a precedent in our city for people's willingness to park somewhere and then go to their destination, because that's a draw. And this would be no different. We have to just get used to it.
It's good to give the context and put it in perspective too. Thank you. What kind of businesses do you hope to attract? I know we sort of touched on the local idea, but what are you guys thinking?
Like I said, this is probably not going to be the destination for general merchandising. Um, Maybe there might be a modicum of that that's a bit more specialty, kind of boutique style, whether it be clothes makers or other artisans of that nature. But I think it's going to be food and beverage heavy, or experiential. Um, and entertainment is probably the angle that this um, program will take. The other aspect we shouldn't overlook is that this is a neighborhood, between Conejo School Road and where 1710 is. If you're not familiar with that building, is Cafe Vassell and Danino's for your listeners. Um, we're going to see somewhere on the order of 400-ish housing units potentially. Um, just on the south side of the boulevard. We haven't even started talking about the north side. So, 400 new households injected into this area, that constitutes a true neighborhood. And so that neighborhood is going to have needs as well, day-to-day uses, dry cleaners, boutique pharmacies, stuff like that. So it'll be a mix of downtown destination food and beverage mixed with the everyday needs of downtowners. So we need to make sure, as part of the strategy, that we can support businesses not just Friday through Sunday, but Monday through Thursday.
I know that this question will come up. Is there going to be a process? Because right now we're at this 30% line, close to it.
Mhm.
When would businesses maybe start being considered for that space? Or where do you see that in terms of the timeline? My next question was the ETA. So I think it kind of like, what are the next kind of steps that people can anticipate?
Yeah. So as we, by the end of June, as in 3 months from now, we'll kind of put pencils down, and we'll go through the environmental process with the full EIR. And that process takes close to a year. And that'll then culminate with visits to the Planning Commission and the City Council in May and June of 2026. And I'm going to fast forward a couple of years. Um, for the west side parcel, the mixed use portion of the project, the city will likely issue an RFP, and we'll say, "Hey, here's an opportunity for someone to build this mixed use program that we've designed. Who's the most qualified to come in and do that?" And then we'll get developers to come in and put their best foot forward. That developer will curate the tenant mix on the ground floor. It'll be their building to operate and manage, and essentially they'll be responding to the market of what they want to see on those ground floor tenants. The other business piece I didn't mention in terms of neighborhood uses is working out, right? Whether it be yoga studios or spin cycle, those kinds of things. We'll probably see some of that as well. Um, how much control the city wants to exert on the ground floor tenants on the west side, I think remains to be seen. I think where the city wants to exercise more control is on the east portion of this program, where the existing city hall is, like that public market near the town square, as well as the ancillary uses around that town square. So it's a balancing act, because you exert too much control, you start to turn off some private operators, and really you need the private sector to make this work well. So we'll be picking and choosing our spots as to where we want to exercise control, but really our main goal is we need to meet the community desire, and I think if we do that right, we'll be okay.
Okay. So we're looking, though, this is 2030 at this point in terms of actually thinking about tenants. I know it's all
Yeah,
publicly
you're not far
ambiguous.
off. Yeah, I would say 2030 is when you'd see the West Side parcel and the new city hall built out, and then 2032 is when you'd see that east side of the programs, start to come to fruition. Because, like I mentioned, that sea of cubicles that currently houses our public works and community development department, that needs to move to a new city hall so we can vacate that building. And it's not until we vacate that we can start to really tear open that building and make it into something else, which is why it's 2 years later than the earlier phases.
I see.
So 2032, by 2032, if everything goes according to plan and there's no giant hiccups, we've built in time for little hiccups, but assuming no giant hiccups, this program could be fully realized by 2032.
That's not that far off.
It'll be here before we know it. Yep.
I know, it really is true. Okay. So those are the community questions. I think the one last one, and we touched upon it, but I believe there's a date in May. When is there another time in which people can come and give you any last feedback, or at least see the current plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So for your listening audience, I'll say there's the unofficial and then there's the official. So unofficially, if you have uh, any community groups, church groups, social clubs, you know, mom groups, anything that you are a part of that you feel would benefit from hearing from any member of this team to either gather input or just share what's happening. Me or a member of the team would be happy to show up at whatever place you ask us to, whether it's in person or virtually. So I want to extend an invitation, and they can get in touch with me. Uh, I'll give a plug for my email address here: Alikhan, AALIKHAN at toaks.gov, TOAKS.gov. Email me and we'll get it set up. So that's the unofficial route. The official route, we have 2 city council dates coming up. April 8th here at the Civic Arts Plaza. You can come in person or you can attend via Zoom. And May 13th. They're going to feel a little bit differently. April 8th is going to be more about the financing plan, getting into the specifics of Teal Boulevard. I know we talked about bikes and road reconfiguration, so we'll talk about that on April 8th. May 13th will be more of the visuals, actually showing the architecture. All the visuals that some of our residents have seen to date are nearly a year old. And so May 13th will be probably the more fun of the 2 meetings if you're putting one of those on your calendar. But in addition to that, we'll have an open house here on May the 6th. So on Tuesday, May 6th, starting at 5 p.m., you can come here. We'll have poster boards of all those visuals, kind of a sneak peek of what you'd see at that May 13th meeting, but a little bit more informal. You can ask questions. Me and the other members of the team will be here on site to have one-on-one conversations with anyone that wants to show up. So those are the 3 dates to put on your calendar if you want to come and share your opinions.
That sounds great, and I love a rendering, and it sounds like we might have some new ones then, which will be fun.
We will. I'm excited. I have. They're still baking, but when they come out, I'm looking forward to seeing what they look like.
And maybe we can even plan one of these meetings. I didn't know you were doing that sort of the unofficial with for the Conejo Valley Visionaries community, or something where they can come and hear in person too if they're not going to these other events. But we can talk about that offline too.
Great.
Okay, so I know I've taken a lot of your time, but I still I have a couple little questions about your role as a deputy city manager. What has surprised you most about the role?
Um, well, I knew what I was signing up for, so it's not like there was any big surprises. I'd say with respect to this project, I think the thing that surprised me the most, I thought I was going to have to do um, a little bit more hand holding to get the community or even our staff to buy into the program. And what I learned, within my first 6 months on the job, is how much pent up energy there was and excitement for this project. And I'm sure you're probably having some of the same kind of conversations when you talk about it with your, friends and neighbors. Uh, right now, everyone's rallying around this giant effort, and um, to me, that's just a bonus. I thought I was going to have to try and bring people along for the ride, but they were already there.
Awesome. What are you most proud of?
Well, I don't have a whole lot of work to show for it yet. I mean, it's been a lot of intellectual academic stuff, but when we actually get this program realized, I mean, that's obviously going to be the thing that I can, for me personally, just having grown up here, and now my wife and I, raising our family here, this is just going to be an awesome value add to our community. But I'll say in the near term, the thing that I'm most proud of is what we touched on earlier, those new voices, those new faces coming out for the first time. That is something that, as a public servant, you don't see a ton of. And so when we're getting those people to show up, that means we're doing something right, and we're finding a way to get those voices heard.
What's your vision for Thousand Oaks?
Uh, I think one of our council members, and I can't remember which meeting it was, but they said it well. And really, my vision is less relevant than the community's vision, but I think I share the community's vision, and that is something for everybody. Um, if you want to live in a suburban environment in your single family home, next to quality parks and a good school district, we have that for you. If you want a downtown with a bit denser environment with a walkable community, um, one day soon we'll have that for you as well. There's no reason why we can't have both in this fine city. And I know there's impassioned viewpoints when it comes to housing and how much is too much. I think it's worthy of reminding folks we're talking about 2 square blocks of a 54 square mile city. And we think about downtowns and how they can be successful. There are communities much, much smaller than ours that have done so successfully. I think of downtown Santa Barbara and Ventura, both of which are cities that are smaller than ours, believe it or not. And so there's no reason why this community, which has been so successful in so many ways, can't have something similar.
Awesome. Okay, two quick rapid fire questions.
Let's hear it.
What's your favorite thing to do in the Conejo Valley as of today?
I think my answer is the same with a lot of people. It's the open space. My dog and my wife and I, we're out there on the trails. It's an asset for our community, and thankfully we've done a great job of managing that.
Great. What's one piece of advice that you would give somebody who's interested in getting involved in city government, whether at a citizen level participation or actually maybe following in some of your footsteps?
If you are interested at the community level, I would say volunteer for a commission or a committee. Often you'll see us try and advertise, hey, who's willing to volunteer some of their time for this particular commission? Sometimes it's tough to get voices out there, new voices. So volunteer your time for some of those. In fact, a lot of people that are currently engaged at higher levels started with those commissions and committees. As a career, we have a variety of professional groups that can help folks get foot in the door. Internships are a great way to start out, just like I did 15 years ago. And we need the next generation interested in public service, because a lot of us are getting ready for retirement. Not me anytime soon, but some of us are. So
Yeah.
we need the next generation to be interested in local government.
Well, I appreciate the community conversations as a way, as you mentioned, for people to get involved in a way that feels a bit more accessible. So, and it really, at least in my case, piqued my interest. So, thank you for hosting those events. And I think that the Downtown Project is one that we can all really leverage as our first taste as involvement, and knowing that like our voice is being heard, and to your point, you've mentioned some things that you didn't consider prior to those meetings and now are maybe even priorities. So that says a lot. So thank you for doing that. And I am thrilled to be able to follow along and see how this all comes together, and excited to get the community involved as well.
Thank you, Christina. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. And as we get into the next chapters of this project, hope you'll have me back and I can share updates with your listeners and keep this conversation going.
Most definitely. Have you RSVP'd to the first ever Conejo Valley Visionaries live event yet? If not, visit at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram to find the RSVP link to our first ever live event on March 24th at Hub 101 in Westlake. This is our Female Founders Series, where you will hear from 4 incredible visionary female entrepreneurs. There will be other fun activities. Starts at 6 o'clock on Monday, March 24th. Visit at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram to find the link to RSVP, and I hope to see you then. Thank you for listening to Conejo Valley Visionaries. If you like today's episode, make sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to rate and review us. That's the best way to support the podcast. To enter our giveaways, learn about local events, and to find out more about each guest, follow at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram. If you want to share your visionary story on the podcast, send us an email. We are always open to guest nominations. Email conejovalleyvisionaries@gmail.com. This episode was produced by Christina Denstead and Justin K. Sloan. Conejo Valley Visionaries is edited by Justin K. Sloan and J. Sloan Productions.